Pat. Got a great chat all lined up as usual, don't you?
Yes, and today this might be a name that is familiar in the Toledo Diocese, Greg Schlueter. Greg's an author, speaker, movement leader. He is very passionate about restoring family, faith, and culture. He is directing communication and marketing for the Institute of American Constitutional Thought and Leadership, and he leads Image Trinity, a dynamic marriage and family movement. I could go on, but this is a short segment, so I will. I won't be able to talk with him if I give his whole bio, but it's amazing. Welcome, Greg. How are you today?
Fabulous. Merry Christmas to you and to all, because we are still in the Christmas season. Have to say that, and Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Today we're talking to Greg about an article he wrote in Crisis Magazine called Conversation, Character, and the Cost of Truth in a Fractured Public Square. A great article, Greg. It brought up a lot of different ideas in my head as I was reading it. But I want to kind of start to help our audience understand a little bit as they hopefully dig into this article too. What is authentic conversation in the marketplace? What is that, and why do you believe it's so rare?
Thanks for asking. Really, this focuses on a number of central characters, not the least of which is a guy named Nick Fuentes. In fact, the original article had a headline, An Honest Look at Nick Fuentes. Many of our listeners may be familiar with the waves created recently when Tucker Carlson interviewed him. There have been a number of prominent analysis commentary on the right, about the right, or Republicans and conservatives and all of that, about how there's great fissure going on. So a quick, I think, experiential insight is that many close to me, solid Catholic parents with kids in good schools are taken up with people like Nick Fuentes, who has undeniably racist, anti-Semitic, denial of Holocaust, racial essentialism views. They're taken up with that. And the question is not simply anger, why are they doing this, but can we go deeper? Right. Can we have the conversation? Can we talk about it? The big key to understanding, I think, many of them, Pat, is COVID it decimated. That era of 4 or 5 years decimated social connectivity, relationships. Yep. We saw the uptick in languishing and depression and all of that. But even more consequentially was an utter disregard, rightly so, of legacy media, because they were told a whole lot of lies that were perpetrated for various reasons, money, politics. We could go into that in another article another time. But not just questioning what was being presented as truth. It decimated a confidence in what we'd say in Thomistic thinking of epistemology, of metaphysics, the way in which we come to know truth, classical forms of coming to conclusions. And so a lot of these commentators, we could talk about Candace Owens and others at different times, because they question and they approach with suspicion, myth becomes very prominent. And in that era, we found out that, the only difference between conspiracy and truth in many cases was about 6 or 7 months. So we need to recover the fundamental principles, the confidence that you can know truth, that there's logic, there's reason, and there's principles, and we ought to avail to those in ordinary courses, short of divine revelation, right? Paul on the road to Damascus, light from on high. So the marketplace is a place where we need to get past the memes, weaponize short little sound bites that we're so prone to, and recover, in so many words, our humanity, our reason and our capacity, and at the core of that, let's just be honest, patience, magnanimity, looking deeper and recognizing that often the case, as with Fuentes, are some family of origin wounds, or a culture that canceled him and disregarded him at Boston College. Many of these people, they need to be listened to. So I'm blabbing here. I'm fire hosing you in classical Greg form. But I think it's very key. Like the Tucker Fuentes interview, somebody very close to us said, if you want to understand our generation, please listen to this interview, which I did. And I'll say I was very impressed at Tucker's stalwart defense of Christianity and asking challenging questions of racial essentialism, which is essentially because of a certain conviction or view, all people are like that. Again, we can get more deeply into that. He challenged some of those fundamental propositions. You heard from Fuentes talk about how his culture has been decimated by COVID. He strongly defended against sexual promiscuity. There's some positive things there. At the end of the day, we need to listen. We need to understand, as Stephen Covey said, we first need to seek to understand before we are understood. And those interested in this conversation really ought not have it if we're not going to do a little bit of the work, listen to hearts, listen to what they're saying. And as we know, relationship is the heart of all the rest.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that came out of this article that I found very interesting, because you make the case that, every person, even, some of the greatest, enemies of truth in our time still had some goodness. They might have been good to their friends or their family or whatever. But you'd say public figures are different. That we have to evaluate public figures differently. How do we do that?
Yeah, so that's a different, I think if we're having a private conversation with people, we are entrusted, we're given a stewardship of their souls, and it ought to be, held sacred. There ought to be spaces, like say with your spouse, right, that's held sacrosanct where you can say what you want to say, where there are ideas that are being floated. But when your career, if you will, is out there, right, it's in social media space, you are known, then what you're affecting is not simply your view, but you're influencing many, many others. And I think it merits public address. They've created the stage. They've been validated on that stage. And it merits, I think, still respect for the person at the very heart of it. Absolutely. But that kind of protection, of course, our Constitution, the way it's been interpreted and free speech and all that would recognize all of this. You're fair game. Now, I think Catholics need to go deeper. Catholics ought not snipe and, kind of relegate ourselves again to just narrow disregarding logic and facts and all of that. We ought to have respect for that person. But it's where the conversation needs to happen because they represent more than just themselves. They're representing a movement.
And don't you think, Greg, that we are in a place now where we kind of, if you like someone, you have to like everything. I mean, it's like I approve of everything.
Oh,
I can't critique at all. Do you think we're in a place like that?
Fabulous. Absolutely. That is such a key point. I mean, can we, even in the mirror, looking at ourselves, we know there are parts of us that each of us are working on our salvation with fear and trembling. We ought to, again, care for the person as they work through their things. There's a different issue, I'd say also, though, for those who disregard that or rationalize or justify that. To your point, though, every human being has a complexity created in the image and likeness of God working through their things. There ought to be respect and honor for that. And, whether I could name any public figures that are coming to mind on any side of ideological rail or whatever, I think the lens of the Father is to look at them and see them as beloved of God. And honestly, the most powerful thing, as you and I know, is to validate that, is to see the good, to sit with where there's splinters, where there's brokenness. Lord, help me to understand what's going on and not write them off. I think that's a grave sin. And I think we're all, maybe tempted to do that because we see this star, this artist writes this song about this or that. Can we name the good? And then in my article, I mentioned Hitler. I mean, there were positive things that need to be regarded, but as a whole, let's recognize he is iconically associated with an Aryan race that sought to, annihilate an entire group of people on the basis of their race.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks, Greg. Thanks so much for being with us today. Have a good week ahead.
You too. God bless. Take care.